So, yun. I'm not sure if you saw already the announcement, but yun. So, last night, nag-usap yung department about the results of the midterm grades. And when we were talking about it, we looked at the batch average and also parang the performance of the whole batch in terms of quiz 3, quiz 4, quiz 5, and also the midterms. And based on the results, for the first time ever, so usually the department doesn't really give parang any um usually the department doesn't usually give any parang special quizzes or any bonuses. So um so for this batch, it's actually pretty special. So how will it work? So right now, you've already received your raw midterm grade. So hypothetically, I got, let's say, 45 points, right? So I have 45 points. The passing for midterms is 65. So in order to help boost your grades for the midterms, what will happen is that this weekend, we're gonna be offering a special optional 20-point quiz. So for that quiz, parang you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. In the sense that, kwari, scenario 1, knock on wood, you took the quiz 0. So it's not gonna be like -20 to your midterm grade, right? So your midterm grade still be 45. Now, kwari, I took it and I got a perfect. So if I got a perfect, that's plus 20. So my 45 becomes a 65 out of 100. So from failing, technically you pass midterms, and then that will increase your class standing for the first half, and then you'll have your remaining 50%. So for me, I think with our mindset, bawi tayo. So the bawi for midterms actually start now with the special optional quiz. Now, in terms of the coverage for this optional quiz, given that it's for midterms 1, same coverage applies. So meaning the way you studied for the midterms and also how you felt about the midterms, you assess kung ano yung mga topics na you need to brush up on in the next few days. My suggestion is you go back to our midterm reviewer, look at which concepts are you having a hard time with. Is it inventory errors? Is it regarding journal entries for perpetual, periodic? Is it um accruals, deferrals? And then send me any emails or questions or items na you want any clarification to. So yun. My suggestion also for this special optional quiz, given the limited time, what I want you to do is focus on the concepts that you were having a hard time with and then madalas lumabas dun sa midterms. So you already took the midterms, right? So I leave it up to you to identify ano ba yung mga usually lumalabas. Make sure na you master the concepts. In terms of the difficulty of this quiz, it's more reasonable than the midterms. It's really a test on how well your understanding of the fundamentals are. So, ayaw pa rin na you'll cram studying the whole coverage, pero meron kayong gaps in knowledge in each of the key topics. So, that will probably give you like a low score in the special optional quiz. Kasi, paano kung hindi lumabas? You have to master like every concept. So, for me, when you study, when you review the exercise, be quick about it, understand the fundamentals of it. So it's gonna be 20 points, 1 hour yung 1 hour yung time allotment, and then it's gonna be conducted in OVLE. So treat it as a normal quiz. So kung ano yung parang typical quiz in terms of like the portion of theory, ilang short probs, it's like a normal quiz. In terms of difficulty, again, there are items that are tricky, like around 2 to 3, but the others should be straightforward. So wag kayong kabahan, just read the problems carefully and then get your extra points, right? So with that said, I think we can proceed to today's topic, which is our cash exercises. Now, for this, I just want to also guide you in terms of how to prepare during the weekend. So today is Thursday. So as much as you want to prepare for your special optional quiz, also please prepare for your cash quiz on Monday. Okay? So for me, if you were to ask my advice in terms of the strategy to study, yun. If you were to ask me how to study for this, what I'll do is starting Tuesday and Friday, or even Friday to Saturday, I will allot the whole time probably just watching the midterm reviewer, doing exercises dun sa class. Not necessarily solving, but understanding how it's solved. And also the past quizzes. So my priority would be rewatch the midterm reviewer, watch do the quizzes again, like all quizzes, particularly quiz 3, quiz 4, quiz 5. And then do the exercises also on the subjects na kinakabahan niyo pa, right? And then maybe you can take it Saturday night or Sunday morning. And then hopefully by Sunday, you allot the whole Sunday brushing up on cash. So today we're just gonna be talking about the exercises. So in terms of like prioritizing, I'll leave it up to you kung ano yung gusto nyong mas i-prioritize. But to ground or to contextualize your decision, yung special 20-point quiz, so technically, if you get plus 20, that will increase your class standing by 6%. If you get perfect, so if you get 10, then 3%. So that's 6% of the past 50% that we've already accounted for. So for example, if your class standing right now is on the class average of 33, from 33, your class standing would be 39. So that's a huge boost, right? Pero on the other side, you have a cash quiz on Monday. Sorry, that's not 6%. That's gonna be 3% of the new 50. So ideally, if you want to be at a really good place, you have to do well in the special optional quiz and also the cash quiz on Monday. So please, if parang kinakabahan kayo on both of these, schedule a consultation on tomorrow or over the weekend. I'll be conducting kasi a special uh makeup exam for some of the batch. So probably I'll only be able to entertain consultations by Friday kasi mag-open na yung special optional quiz on uh on Saturday. So it will open Saturday 9 a.m. and it will close Sunday 9 p.m. So are there any questions before we proceed to the cash exercises from the rest of the class? If none, kindly thumbs up so that we can proceed.
So is this time limited ulit?
Yeah, sorry. So the time limit is 1 hour. So please, again, actually, some of the people in the department, sabi nila kaya na 45 minutes. So you can expect na ganun. So marami siyang items. So 20 points, right? So, pero it's so straightforward that if you have a good grasp on the fundamentals, you'll be able to answer it directly. Pero that doesn't mean na you don't review for it. For me, please, once in a lifetime opportunity, I'm not gonna be able to assure you na there's gonna be a special optional quiz for the finals. Most likely with all the bonuses or parang the allotments that the department has given is probably one of the last chances na quote-unquote bonus siya. So please review pa rin, particularly those that had a hard time for the midterms. Please review. This is your chance to catch up. Apply the learnings. So wag niyo pabayaan yung theory. And then yung sa short prompts, first read the required and then answer kagad. And then kung hindi niyo alam, skip kagad. Kasi even if you get mistakes, hindi naman yun babawas sa inyo. Yun. And then yun, if you have any topics na you want to deep dive on, send me an email. Let's schedule a consultation. And then I can direct you to exercises in class na you need to prioritize in terms of particular topics. Yun. Are there any other questions for this? Or if none, kindly thumbs up if we're good to go sa cash exercises. So now we proceed to cash exercises. So thank you so much. I saw people's submissions for Ovle. So I'll just double check alongside the email for like the handwritten solutions. I think parang seeing the attempts, most of the problem were in back recon. Like I think a lot of people had a lot of attempts um for that. So we'll discuss. Today, we're just gonna be quickly going through the exercises, and then I'll also parang walk you through parang other exercises outside of the class, particularly from Valix, para lang to ground how you study efficiently, right? So today we're gonna be discussing 6 exercises, wherein 2 would be cash classification, 2 would be PCF, and then 2 would be bank recon. So let's first have a review on accounting for cash and cash equivalents. So like what I mentioned, if there are 3 guiding principles on how you categorize cash, is that it's number 1, cash is more than money. So cash will comprise cash on hand, cash in bank, and cash funds, right? And then kindly take note na there is also cash equivalents. So usually, sa line item ng financial statements, cash and cash equivalents are just jumbled up into one line item. Okay? So please take note of the distinctions. But what really makes cash cash is that 2 things. It has to be liquid, so it's unrestricted in use, and it's readily available. And then for cash classification items, pagalingan lang sa theory. How do you understand checks? How do you understand overdrafts, compensating balances? As long as you know the rules, everything should be straightforward. So with that said, we go to E8.15, wherein it will give you 7 items, and then it will ultimately ask you what should be reported in the balance as cash and cash equivalents given the 7 items. In essence, if you were in the exam, or if you were, so let's adopt na the finals mindset. So this is in the questionnaire. Literally what I'll do to save time is I won't use my yellow pad. What I'll do is here pa lang I will check or X which one should be considered as cash or cash equivalent. If it's X, I will determine what other classification. Kung hindi siya cash, what it is. What is it? And then lahat ng may check, I'll just total to get my cash and cash equivalent. So para mabilis. So pag hindi ko alam, so when I'm going through these 7 items, pag meron akong hindi alam, I'll answer it as well as I think, and then go na kaagad to the next question, right? So basically, I have, in terms of my solution, I have 2 columns. One is classification, and then one is CCE balance. So meaning if it's a cash and cash equivalent, I will take note of the amount. If it's not, then I will disregard, right? So let's first go to line item 1. So here, ang keywords here is that it's 60 of currency in coin in a lockbox. Usually, when you see currency in coins in a lockbox, this is a clear indication that it's for a petty cash fund. And as we know, petty cash fund is under cash funds. Since it's used for current purposes, then it is cash. Next, merong April dated checks, but it has not yet been deposited. So basically, it's still cash, but it's cash on hand or undeposited collections of 260. So meron ulit check, but it's post-dated. So we go back to our rule. If it's a post-dated check that you receive, can you cash it out or deposit it? No, right? So if it's post-dated, the only time that you'll be able to encash this is May 1. So this 85 right now is not cash, but an accounts receivable. Technically, hindi ka pa niya binabayaran, right? So again, please familiarize yourself with concepts related to checks. And then the next 2 are pretty straightforward. Checking account is cash in bank, 25. Savings account is cash in bank, 48. And then in the in the sixth item, you'll see prepaid postage. So this is the first time we'll see this in terms of exercises. But if it's prepaid postage, then it's prepaid assets, so it's not cash. So if you ask, first time you've encountered prepaid postage, you just ask yourself, is it highly liquid? Can I buy everything with prepaid postage? The answer is no. So it's not cash, but it's a prepaid asset. Next, a new concept, an IOU from the company receptionist. So literally, an IOU is when an employee leaves a note na nakalagay, I owe, as in may utang ako sa company, right? So it's an IOU. So it's not cash, but it's a receivable from the employee that wrote the IOU. So now that we have those, so we're done with step 1, which is to classify everything. And then we will just add. So 60 plus 260 plus 25 plus 48. So the correct answer here is 7,620, right? So pretty straightforward. Again, every line item, you just classify whether cash or cash equivalent. And then you look at the balances, right? So just to review, post-dated checks are checks that are drawn and recorded, already given to the payee, but it bears a subsequent date, right? So right now it's December, pero it's post-dated to April. So in the form of the payee, when you receive the check, kala mo na bayaran na yung accounts receivable mo. So nagde-debit ka ng cash. But when you figure out na it's post-dated, you reinstate the accounts receivable. And that's why, in the example, the post-dated check was not classified as cash, but as an accounts receivable. Next concept. IOU or travel advances. So, in the petty cash fund, may pera doon, right? May mga bills. And let's say, nag-order ka ng kape, right? Wala kang barya. So, basically, kumuha ka ng 10 pesos dun sa petty cash fund. And then, nagsulat ka dun sa treasurer na, "Uy, umutang ako sa company, I'll pay you 10 pesos pag nasuklian ko na or nabaryahan ko na yung pera ko." Then let's say nakalimutan niya. So when the custodian opens the PCF box, it will see an IOU rather than the 10 pesos inside the box. So in the IOU, meaning yung employee na kumuha needs to pay the company. So that means that it's not cash, but it's a receivable, right? So another thing is that pare hassle na i-collect. You can also treat it as a quote-unquote advance to your employee. So, yung 10 pesos na yon, as a company, I'll just say, o sige, advance ko na lang sa'yo. So that when I pay your salary for the next month, I'll subtract 10 pesos. So technically, the advance to employee is current asset. So IOUs can be treated as a receivable or an advance to employee. Same with travel advances. Okay? So, but in essence, it's not cash. Next, you have postage stamps and supplies. So usually, pag bukas mo ulit ng PCF box, you'll see a bunch of stamps, you'll see a bunch of supplies. Again, these are not cash. These are all prepaid assets. So you ask yourself, are these items liquid? Definitely not. You can't exchange food with stamps, right? Or, well, generally. Or rubber bands or paper clips. So in essence, if you see these in the items, then you know na it is not cash. So with that said, with all of those new insights, let's tackle the second cash classification, right? So for the second cash classification, we'll have commercial savings account of 300,000 and a commercial checking account of 400,000. So this is cash in bank of 700,000. Next, it says travel advance of 900,000. So it says travel advances of So it says travel advances of 90,000 for executive travel. So we've already seen this. Travel advances are what? Advances to your, sorry. So advance to your employee of what? 90,000. So this is not cash. Next, a separate cash fund in the amount of 750 is restricted for retirement. So ano yung rule for cash funds? If it's restricted for long-term use, which is long-term debt, therefore it is a non-current asset. Petty cash, obviously, is petty cash fund, which is cash. So we add 500. An IOU from Mary Jane Gray. So an IOU is a receivable, so it's not cash. A bank overdraft. So here we have our first clear item of bank overdraft. So pag yung bank overdraft, what we will do is you ask ourselves, may deposit ba in the same bank? Well, according to the problem, it has no deposits at this bank. Therefore, we follow the default, which is bank overdrafts are generally current liability. Next, money market placement. So I told you na money market placement or money market account, if it's silent, it's automatically cash. But it says maturing 120 days after December 31, 2021. So this is an investment which would be a current asset. So cash has received a check that is dated January 12, so it's a post-dated check, so it's a receivable. And then meron kang cash balance. So the rule for cash balance is if it's legally or not legally restricted. In this case, it's not legally restricted, therefore it's cash in bank of 250,000. And then finally, you have currency in hand of 3,850. So if you add all of these, it would sum to 954,350. So are there any questions with E8.16? Are there any questions for cash and cash equivalents? If none, kindly thumbs up so that we can proceed. Okay, merong nag-raise na hand. Clarence.
Hello, sir. So, ito, question lang. So, for example, dito sa letter G, what if mangyari is instead of maturing 120 days, maging 90 days, would it become a cash equivalent kasi it follows the 3-month rule?
Yes, correct. So, the reason why I highlighted G, Clarence, is that I told you, pag money market account, generally, pag naka-silent yung problem, it's less than 3 months. But then, for this particular account, probably different banking practice in the Philippines kasi naka sa US context or whatever. The money market placement account matures 120 days after December 31. Right? So, right now, we're at December 31. So, the 3-month rule is that it's purchased, it should be purchased within 3 months. Since 120 days, it failed the 3-month rule, and therefore, it's not a cash equivalent anymore. Yun. Kaya siya ganun, Clarence. Was I able to answer your question, Clarence?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good question. Kiara, you have a question?
Yes, sir. Hi, sir. Yung sa letter E po, yung IOU, doesn't just mean na like utang po sa company kasi from a customer daw siya. So ito, hindi po kailangan na employee yung IOU or
Correct. Yeah. So an IOU, technically, just means na the customer or the employee will just say, may utang ako sa company. So, in any case, be it a customer or an employee, that would be a receivable from our end. Kasi on the other party, it's a payable on their end, right? Yeah. So, good distinction. So, IOUs can come from anyone, but in essence, how you treat it is receivable. The reason why I highlighted an employee IOU is that you have this unique relationship na yung utang niya sa'yo, pwede mo nalang ikaltas in the next month's salary. That's why you can treat it also as, instead of receivable, you can treat it as advance to employee. And an advance to employee, you should treat it as a current asset that's similar to a receivable. Yun. Thank you for these questions. Other questions before we proceed? Okay. So just to summarize, basically cash on hand. Please memorize or master all of these concepts. Ngayon pa lang, mag-start na tayo mag-aral for finals. So, once you master these concepts, once you have really good notes, pag-review nyo sa finals, madalis na lang. So, please master this slide. Please master also bank overdrafts, compensating balances. What are the rules? So, pag bank overdraft, default is it's a current liability. Magkakaroon lang tayo ng exception if you can offset it to cash. So, again, if same account, same bank, pero different accounts, that's the only time you can offset. For compensating balance, you just ask yourself, legally restricted ba? If it's not, it's cash and cash equivalent. If it's yes, it's either a current asset or an NCA. But more importantly, it's not cash. For cash funds, the rule is, what is the purpose of the fund? If it's current purposes like dividend fund, payroll fund, petty cash fund, all of those would be CCE or cash and cash equivalent. Pero pag non-current yung purpose ng fund, like a sinking fund, or magpapataya ka ng building, papaayos mo yung CR sa BA parang in the next 18 months, it's held for non-current use. So the purpose of the fund would be non-current asset. Next, aside from this, the 3 definitions of cash, you also have cash equivalents. So these are some examples. And generally, honestly, all of these are just names. And then these are just some of the definitions. But at the end of the day, ang masusunod palagi is 3-month rule, right? That it should be purchased 3 months before maturity. Aside from sa cash equivalents, kindly memorize also what are the defining characteristics of it. So STHLRCIR, it's short-term, highly liquid, readily convertible, short-term investments that are good as cash because they have insignificant risk of changes in value. Bakit insignificant rin yung risk na of changes in value? Because it's so near the maturity date. It's purchased 3 months before maturity, right? So in essence, in any theory or short problems, pag tinanong sa inyo yung balance, ang panghahawakan nyo would be your mastery over the cash and your mastery over the cash equivalent. Next, we can now proceed to petty cash fund. So sa petty cash fund, for me, if you're still having a hard time, please rewatch the video na we watched in class 2 sessions ago. But in essence, these are the important milestones for petty cash. 3 lang naman yan. First thing that will happen to a petty cash is that you will establish the fund. When you establish the fund, that's the only time na lalabas yung PCF account. Right? So, PSCF cash. When you make payments from the fund, walang entry. Huwag kayong malito. Every time gumagastos ka, every time nababawasan yung petty cash fund mo, there is no journal entry. Instead, your job as a custodian is to collect receipts. So that during replenishment, that's the time wherein dun lalabas lahat ng mga incidental transactions. So you'll record various expenses, receivables, and supplies. Now, ano nagpapahirap sa PCF? Ang nagpapahirap sa PCF is sa replenishment. Under replenishment, there are 3 scenarios. And then there are 2 major types. What do I mean by 3 scenarios? The 3 scenarios are, when you replenish, wala kang cash shortage, wala kang cash overage. So your journal entry would be something like this. Now, if you have a shortage wherein the PCF is higher than the accounted for, or any, meaning may debit ka ng cash over and short, that's an expense, right? So nagkulang yung na-account for mo versus ano ba dapat yung value ng fund. Baliktad pag cash overage. Now, clear, yun yung 3 scenarios. The next question you ask is, immaterial ba siya or material? The only difference is, pag material, mag-iiba lang yung pangalan. Ito, pag immaterial, cash over and short. Debit pag shortage, credit kapag overage. Pag cash shortage, it's gonna be a receivable from custodian, and then yung isa, credit payable to custodian. And then the last would be, you increase the PCF fund or decrease the PCF fund. So, only in establishment and only in increases or decreases will I ever see the PCF account or the petty cash fund account. In replenishment, it will always be cash. So yun lang yung mga concepts na we look at. And then please, if hindi pa sa inyo clear the cash overage and shortage, please revisit all of these examples na we discussed in class. Now, if you notice, parang I'm not asking for receipts because now in part 2, I'm trusting kasi na I saw your attempts, you were able to solve this na by your own. Now, I'm just trying to frame like how to optimally solve for all of these types of transactions. So in PCF, we're blessed because in the exercises, dalawa yung format na binigay sa atin. The first format is actually the easier format because very clear what are the things that are happening. But the trade-off is it looks very intimidating. Honestly, when I was a 99 student, hirap na hirap ako for PCF for some unknown reason. And the only reason na I could attribute was that na-intimidate ako kasi ang haba ng mga problems when it comes to PCFs. But then now, after 2 years, after 3 years of taking, after 99, when I was in 114, I realized the PCF is super easy and super straightforward. Dapat, you just have a clear understanding of what happens in petty cash fund. So the video, if you watch that and you really understand how it works in your head, you can imagine a timeline of what's happening. So pag ganito, and maraming nangyayari, one of the ways I solve for this is I'll make a timeline. So I'll read the problem once, and then I'll establish a timeline. So the first thing I notice is that it was established on March 1. So I know that I need to make a journal entry on March 1 for establishment. And then, the fund was replenished on March 15. Now, itong nakakatakot na table na to are just the list of things that they were able to find inside the lockbox during March 15. So, itong chunk na to is just a replenishment journal entry on March 15. And then, may replenishment ulit on March 30. And then the last is that on March 31, the amount of the fund was increased to 175. So, basically, apat lang yung nangyari. Nag-establish, nag-replenish ng 15, nag-replenish ng 30, tapos nag-increase yung fund. So, with that, let's take on each sub-scenario. So, first is the establishment. So, sa establishment, dalawa lang naman titingnan ko. What is the balance or what should be the balance of your PCF at all times? It should be 100. And then titingnan ko lang yung materiality. So 20 is the threshold on the cash overage or shortage. That's gonna be important in terms of finalizing our journal entry. But now that I know that the PCF is 100, then our journal entry would be straightforward. Debit PCF, tumaas yung PCF fund at 100. Credit cash of 100. Bakit credit cash? Because based on the video, in order to start your petty cash fund, what you'll do is you'll issue a check in the bank worth 100 pesos, supposedly. Magkakaroon ka ng 100 pesos in coins and in bills, ilalagay mo yun sa lockbox. So that particular relationship is housed in this journal entry, debit PCF, credit cash of 100. Next, punta tayo sa replenishment. So now, replenishment usually yung dadali sa inyo in PCF. In replenishment, focus on each replenishment period. So let's focus on March 15. So I need a journal entry account to replenish the fund. So my tip for you is write your journal entry for replenishment like this, para madali. Step 1, you get muna the cash credit. Palagi, pag replenishment, you can expect that there will be a credit in cash. And the credit in cash would always be what should be the fund. So alam natin that the fund or the PCF should be at 100 minus your cash on hand. Your cash on hand during the replenishment date is 2. Therefore, kung 2 pesos or 2 pesos na lang yung natira, what you will expect is that the custodian will issue a check worth 98 pesos so that ma-replenish yung fund. And please take note that the credit is cash, not PCF. So, bakit cash? Because they will issue a check worth 98. After mo makuha yung credit in cash, magkakaroon ka na ng very straightforward. You list down all the receipts in the form of your accounting terms, and kindly take note na you group similar transactions. So ito, stamp inventory muna tayo. That would be debit inventory for 39. Then you'll have freight out, so copy lang, freight out of 21. And then you'll have miscellaneous expense. But wait, may miscellaneous expense here, pero you see that the fifth receipt also has miscellaneous expense. So we just add 6 plus 5, 11. So you can have a miscellaneous expense of 11, and then travel expense of 24. And then last step is balance the entry. So tapos ka na with your cash credit and then the debits comprising of your assets, your expenses, etc., etc. Determine if the difference is material or not. So what I will do here is that I will add all of my debits. 39 plus 21 plus 11 plus 24. I have 95 in debits and I have a 98 in credits. So I need an additional 3 in the debit side. So alam kong 3 to. But now the name of this entry will depend whether the difference of 3 is material or immaterial. Again, 20 is our threshold for immateriality. Since it's below 20, this is a cash over in short. So the next question na itatanong sa inyo once you do the journal entry probably would be, is this cash over in short a shortage or an overage? For me, the easiest way to do this is yung cash over in short nyo is in a debit column. Debit. And what are usually in the debit? Expenses. So cash over in short as a debit is an expense. And magkakaroon ka lang ng expense if there's a shortage. Yung expense mo is basically, for some unknown reason, nawalan ka ng 3 pesos. So that's your expense. So pag debit si cash over in short, that's a expense or a shortage, right? Next. So ito yung journal entry. So we do the same format lang for March 31. Again, step 1, identify what is your fund minus cash on hand. So right now it's 7 yung cash on hand. What is the current size of the fund? 100. So debit cash, I credit cash of 93 again because they'll issue a replenishment check. And then step 2, list down all the receipts. So miscellaneous expense, so 15 plus 9, 24. Travel expense, freight out, and postage expense. Then balance the entry. Determine if the difference is material or not. So I'll add muna the debits. The debits total 96, while the credit is just cash of 93. Now, sino yung mas maliit? Si credit. So I know that I need a credit of 3. So the next thing I'll ask myself is this 3 the difference material or immaterial? It's immaterial because it's below 20. So now I'll have a credit of cash over in short. Now, the credit of cash over in short, is this a shortage or overage? Again, if it's credit, what's usually credited? Revenue accounts. Since revenue accounts, may income ka. And it's an income, that means may overage. Meaning, for some other reason, may extra 3 pesos ka in your bank, in your PCF. So that's an income on your end, right? So this is the journal entry for March 30 replenishment. Then finally, when you increase or decrease, you just see, you want to increase the fund to 175. So basically, how to get 75 increases, new fund minus original. So debit PCF, credit cash of 75. So now, the only thing I'll also remind you is that please, every time mag-i-increase si fund, make sure na you track it so that you'll know kung ano yung replenishment check. So we'll see that in the second exercise. So in total, ito yung journal entries for this particular account. Are there any questions for 8.3? Kindly thumbs up if everything's okay. Okay, got it. So kindly give me 1 minute. I'll just fix them. Okay, okay. So, with that said, let's proceed to PCF, the second example. So now in PCF, this is the more unfriendly format, wherein it's just a block of text. Again, take each event as they come. So what I'll do is just look at it line item by line item. So first is establish the petty cash fund. So this is pretty straightforward. Debit PCF 200, credit cash 200. Next, nagkakaroon ka na ng replenishment. Now, let's look at it line by line. So the first thing na I want to identify is, what is my credit cash? What is my credit cash? So here, I see na they wrote a check for 175. So this writing a check is a replenishment check. So I can assume na it's gonna be credit 175. To check, it still said that the cash fund consists of cash on hand of 25. And like what we mentioned, what you need to do is just 200, which is what should be the fund, minus the cash on hand, 25. So tama, 175 na. See, replenishment, check. So alam ko na yung credit ng cash, so the rest would be just listing down all of the petty cash receipts. So you have a freight out of 74.40, entertainment expense of 36, posted expense 33.70, right? So posted expense of 33.70 and miscellaneous expense of 27.50. Then my last step is I will add or balance this entry. My total debits is 171.6. My total credit is 175. So now I know that it's a debit of 3.40 para mag-balance. Since it's a debit, it's an expense. Therefore, there was a shortage. And then, ito na yung difference ni second exercise. Nag-increase yung fund in the middle of the month. So if you increase to 400, then it's just PCF cash 200. And then, replenish the petty cash fund. So again, ano yung credit natin cash? 283. Now, bakit 283? Yung new balance of your fund is no longer 200, but now it's 400 minus the cash on hand of 117. So 283 yung replenishment check. So credit cash 283, and then same exercise, list down your debits. So posted expense, entertainment expense, and freight out. And then you balance the entry. My debit's 282, my credit's 283. So you have a cash overage short of 1, which is an expense, which is a shortage. So we're done with petty cash fund. Are there any question for petty cash fund? Kindly thumbs up if everything is okay. Okay. So last would be bank recon. So for bank recon, honestly, it looks hard, but there's only one formula you need to master and concept. It's the adjusted cash balance. So regardless of the format, I'll prove to you that you can solve it most of the time as long as you have a clear grasp on our adjusted cash balance, wherein you separate the two. You have an adjusted cash, and then you look at the book reconciling items. So that's plus bank credit memos minus bank debit memos, adjust for errors to get your correct cash balance. So that's on the book side. On the bank side, you'll have unadjusted bank accounts plus DIP minus NOC, adjust for bank errors, and you'll arrive with your correct cash balance. Now, in the Wyatt problem, it had a pseudo bank recon. But as you can see, mali yung pagcategorize niya of all of these things. So basically, this is such a straightforward solution wherein you look at the item and then you classify it correctly. So let's start. Cash balance per bank. So this cash balance per bank is your unadjusted cash per bank. So you just put it here. Okay, next, add an NSF check. So if you fully mastered the theory behind adjusted bank recon method, you know that an NSF check is usually a bank debit memo. Bakit ulit bank debit memo si NSF check? So usually, an NSF check is a check issued by a customer of yours. So when you get that check, you'd say na parang, okay, may 490 ako in cash. Nice. So minus ko yung receivable, and then I'll recognize the 490 cash. But lo and behold, in your bank statement, sasabi si bank, here's a debit memo. The check you receive from this customer actually bounced. Therefore, you should not treat it as cash and babawasan yung bank statement mo ng 490. So in your book, it's a bank debit memo. Therefore, it's minus 490. And then bank service charge. So binawasan ulit yung pera mo. So that's a bank debit memo also of 25. And then you ignore this adjusted balance per bank because they're wrong. Next, cash balance per book. So 3875.10. And then ito, DIT plus DIT minus OC 730. So 336.20, 336.20. Now, be super smart about bank recon. My favorite part about bank recon is para hindi ka sure about certain items. Like book reconciling or bank reconciling. Scenario 1, hindi ka sure about book reconciling items. You don't know how to treat the NSF check, let's say. But you know that it's either a bank credit memo or a bank debit memo. You don't know if it's plus 490, minus 490. But on the other hand, sure ka na tama yung bank theory mo. Now you know that it's plus DIT minus OC. So what I'll do is I will solve for the correct cash balance. So sure ako na 356.20 plus DIT lang naman to of 530 minus OC of 730. Ang correct cash balance ko is 336.20. Now, yung 3875.20, kailangan ko lang siyang gawing 336.20. So, ang alam ko lang is that yung 3875.20, sinubtractan ko ng 25. So, right now, it's 3850.2. But I want to make it 336.20. So, even though I don't know how to treat this NSF check as a bank debit memo, mapapalabas ko yung 490 by just subtracting 3850.20 minus 3360.20 minus 490 pala. Therefore, I'll know that it's a bank debit memo. So, ganun lang yung style sa bank recon. Usually, mas madali si bank kapag binigay na sa inyo kagad si DIT at si OC. So, use that to solve for the correct cash balance and then use that to solve any hindi kayo clear about bank debit or bank credit memo. Conversely, kapag mahirap, like our second example in our bank recon deep dive, solve mo muna yung cash per book and then dun mo palabasin si DIT or si OC. So, discard lang. And then, another note, all of these things are connected. So, please wag kayong malito kung biglang ang nawala si unadjusted cash per book or nawala si cash per bank. You just have to be able to solve for this X. Fill in the table and then solve for X, right? So, pare, binigay sa inyo, wala tong 3,560. So, in essence, what you'll do is you solve for the correct balance of 336.20. But since we're working our way pataas, so ito yung 33620, ito yung wala, we're working our way pataas, babaliktaran lang natin yung effects. So pag NOC plus 730 minus 530, I'll arrive at 356.20, right? So ganun lang. Or wala si cash per book. How do you do that? You solve for the correct balance using the bank side. So alam natin na 336.20. And since pataas or baliktad, we just add 490 plus 25. So, what I'm trying to show you is, as long as sobrang memorize nyo, second nature sa inyo tong format na to, you'll be able to solve for any missing X. And then you'll also be able to categorize. So the last step here is that you just have to record the journal entry. My tip for you for recording journal entry is step 1, get the difference. 336.20 minus 3875.20 is negative 515. So since it's negative, you know that it's a credit cash in bank 515. So the next items na lang would be the 490 and the 25. The 490 is a service charge expense kasi it's a bank service charge. And since it's an NSF check na tumalpo, you have to reinstate a receivable of 25. So ito yung journal entry. Are there any questions for bank recon number 1? So actually nakuha naman ng lahat ata in their first try or second try yung first part. Kindly let me know if everything's okay. Kindly thumbs up if everything's clear. Okay. So ito, this is a bit more complicated since it's in paragraph form, but I will just use the same format. So cash account per ledger is 6738.90, bank statement 6968. Then I'll go over the 7 items. The statement include a debit memo. Debit memo, so bank debit memo, minus 40. Cash sales of 883.50 were incorrectly made for 933.15. Now, this is obviously a book error. So the bank credited Tim's the correct amount. So okay si bank, tama si bank, ang may mali si book. Now, what is a cash sale? That's a revenue on your end. Supposedly, yung revenue mo lang is 883. But instead, you recognize a revenue of 933. So, mas mataas yung revenue na ni-recognize mo than what you actually earned. Therefore, you have to subtract the revenue you incorrectly recognized by the correct amount, 883.50. So for your book error number 1, you have to subtract 50 from your cash per book. Kasi to represent na nag-overstate ka in terms of your revenue. Number 3, madali lang. OC 188.50, OC of 276.25 and 1880.50 na deposit and transit. October 4, incorrectly journalized. Pag incorrectly journalized, it's another book error. Ito naman, it's a payment. Supposedly, yung payment mo is 685. But you only accounted for a payment of 658. So binawasan mo lang yung pera mo ng 658 when dapat binawasan mo ng 685. So what's the difference between the two numbers? It's 27. So meron ka pang additional 27 worth of expense that you should recognize. So dapat bababa rin si cash per book ng 27. Number 5, 2,600 was collected by bank through ETF. So tumaas yung bank account mo because for some other reason sa bank statement, merong pumasok na transfer. So that's a bank credit memo of 2,690. And then, meron ka raw bank error because there was a canceled check by Tomins, not Timins. So, incorrectly charged ka raw ng 360. So, binawasan ka raw ng bank ng 360. So, since hindi ka naman dapat nila binawasan ng 360, that should be reinstated as plus 360. And then lastly, you have an NSF check of 380. And as we know, NSF checks are debit memos. So minus 380. You'll be able to solve for your correct cash balance of 8931.9. Right? Are there any questions on any of the line items that we discussed? Ay, sorry, meron yata. Yup. So there's a good question, which I think will move towards naman here. So there are no questions here, but so journal entry usually mahirap, pero honestly, for me, don't over hyperly fixate on journal entries. It's probably -2. Pero syempre, it's good to get the 2 points right. Pero how do you journalize? You only look at bank book adjustments. You ignore bank, right? And then, you get the difference first. 8931.90 minus 6738.90. May 2193 ka. Since it's positive, that's debit cash in bank. Next, let's look at 2690. So it's a collection. Since you were able to collect 2690, bumaba yung notes receivable mo. So this credit memo would be credit 2,690. Next, you have a DM of printing 40. Now this 40, you can categorize it as a bank service charge. You can categorize it as a miscellaneous expense. Pero ang importante is you understand that it should be an expense. So debit 40. So we won't be strict in the naming. I was just strict in the naming sa journal entry because wala kasi para lang ma-solve ni Oble, right? Nang tama yung grades niyo. But if you answered miscellaneous, bank service charge expense, it's fine. The 380 is an NSF check. If it's an NSF check, you have to reinstate a receivable of 380. And then, may bank error ka of sales. So, yung sales mo, kailangan bawasan ng 27. And then, your expense or accounts payable should be 27. So, balik ka. Sorry. So, yep. So basically, ganito lang yung journal entry. And then actually, that's it. We're done with all of your cash exercises. Are there any questions for any of the exercises? Kindly let me know if not, or okay. Yeah. Kindly thumbs up if everything's okay. Okay. So, with that said, we're officially done with your class exercises. Pero I think we have time. So actually, pretty chill lang yung lesson. So, I'll just share with you some of the things na I will send for the class. Sorry, I think depende pa kasi if I'll have a voice after this. Pero I'm not sure if I can record like a recorded lecture of me going through some Valix examples. But I'll try to do it now, and then let's see if I can post. Pero if not, I'll just send you the Excel. Again, straightforward naman siya given that it has solutions. Can everyone see the Excel file? Just wanted to make sure. Okay. So here, in these extra solutions, basically I have different tabs. The first tab is puro CCE examples or cash and cash equivalents. The next one is PCF examples. And then the 16 to 16.4 are bank recon. Now again, for me, please master bank recon. Doing all of the Valix exercises will help you, both comprehensive and basic, para lang ma-reinforce kagad lahat na automatic. Pag NSF, debit memo. Ganun. Or pag bank service charge, debit memo. Note collectible, that's credit memo. Pag book error, you'll know how to understand, right? So, for CCE, my suggestion is, kung wala kayong time, rather than answering it, read through the given, and then highlight what are the things that seem unfamiliar to you, right? So, here are just some of the examples, but for me, rather than answering this, solving, taking time, what I'll do is I'll read the given and then I'll be honest with myself. What are the terms na pag lumabas sa quiz, babagsak ako kasi hindi ko alam paano i-treat? For me, for this 3.13.2, it's cash and bank payroll account. So hindi ko alam paano i-treat si payroll account. And then probably hindi ko rin alam paano i-treat si cash and bank restricted account for building construction expected to be dispersed in 2018. So rather than solving for it, I'll jump straight to the answer key. the cash in bank payroll account is indeed cash. And then the explanation here is that the payroll is for current purposes generally. And therefore, pag cash in bank payroll account, it's part of cash. Next, yung cash in bank na restricted yung account it's for long-term use kasi to be dispersed in 2018 or it's because it's for the acquisition of a non-current asset. So, kapag naka-restrict tapos ang pangbibili ko is for a non-current asset, then it's not cash pala. It's a non-current investment. So ultimately, ang correct answer dito is 8.3 million because you ignore the restricted 3 million but you include the payroll of 1 million. So ganun lang mag-aral for CCE. So other things. So I'll move on to the next. 13.3. Ang hindi ko alam dito, there's a check drawn on Thor's account payable but not mailed. So since it's not mailed, it's technically an undelivered check drawn on Thor's account. So pera pa rin pala to. Kasi hindi ko pa pala sinusubtract kasi it's undelivered. So I hope you already know this because we already discussed this. And then ito, cash sinking fund. So I know it's a petty cash fund. It's a cash fund. But it's a sinking fund for current or non-current purpose. According to here, a cash in sinking is a non-current investment because it's set aside for a payment of non-current liability. So meaning, in the future, in the exams, if I see a sinking fund, I know it's a fund set aside for non-current liability. And again, if the fund is set aside for a non-current asset, non-current liability, or for non-current purposes, hindi siya cash, right? It's a non-current asset. Yun. Are there any questions? Kindly tell me kung masyado mabilis. Pero pinapasadahan ko lang ng mabilis kasi I just want to show you paano maging efficient in your study time when you're studying using Valix or Wacom. Again, the reason I'm using Valix is because a lot of your classmates told me na mas comfortable sila there. So, we move on to 13.4. Okay, so 13.4, I'll just copy it. Okay. So sa 13.4, ang nahirapan ako dito. So I read it and then, okay, I don't know what a certificate of deposit is. And the traveler's check, parang I remember discussing this in class, but parang hindi ko pa alam how to treat it now na it's in a question format. So I look at the answer key. The traveler's check was treated as part of cash. So, okay. And then the money order is also treated as part of cash. And then yung certificate of deposit is treated as a cash equivalent. So now be careful. Ang tinanong sa 13.4 is, what should be recorded as cash, not cash and cash equivalent? So even though the certificate of deposit is 300,000, hindi siya sinama because it was asking for cash, not cash and cash equivalent. So ganun lang yung mga nuances. I'm not sure if in the quiz or in the exam will ask you like that specific, like what's the cash balance and then you take out the cash equivalent. Pero please be aware that there's a distinction. Magkaiba if ang hinanap is cash and magkaiba pag hinanap cash and cash equivalent. Dun papasok yung mastery nyo in theory. So just be careful. I'm not sure kung lalabas yan or not, but please be careful. Yun. So for the next 5 minutes, let's just finish the cash and cash equivalent. Okay. So 13.5. Here, when I read through this, ang hindi ko alam is share investments of 1 million are actively traded in the stock market. My gut feel here is that baka pag actively traded, it's highly liquid. So baka cash to. And then ito, commercial paper, hindi ako familiar sa commercial paper of 1.5 with the terms of 9 months but purchased on December 31, which they had 3 months to go until maturity. So again, rather than solving for it, I jump straight to the answer key. In the discussion, it said that the share investments cannot qualify as cash equivalents because wala silang maturity. So share investments, since wala silang maturity, they could never fulfill the 3-month rule. It failed the 3-month rule, and therefore it's not a cash equivalent. Commercial papers are just synonyms pala of money market accounts. That, therefore, I just have to test if they're within 3 months. So since they're within 3 months, then it's a cash equivalent. And then, kindly take note na difference, what should be reported as cash. So yung cash niya, it's just the coins and currencies of 3.4 million. And then yung cash equivalent was the government T-bill and the commercial paper of 1.5. Yun. What else? Yun. And then siguro last would be this one. So ito, maraming akong hindi alam. First is undeposited receipts, including a post-dated customer check. So how do you treat that? Here, what they did was, undeposited receipts are part of cash, pero you subtract the post-dated check, which makes sense. Kasi the post-dated check is a receivable, not cash at this point. Next, yung cash in bank per bank statement has a 200,000 outstanding. So how do I do this? Yung cash in bank per statement, 2.5 million minus OC of 200,000. So technically, parang nagkaroon ako ng informal bank recon of 2.3 million. And then, deposits in bank closed by BSP. Is this cash or not cash? Apparently, the deposit in bank closed by BSP is a non-current asset. So every time I see that in the exam, I'll treat it as a non-current asset. Vouchers paid out of collections. Vouchers paid should be recorded as expenses. So every time I see a voucher paid out of collections not yet recorded, these are expenses. It won't affect my cash. So ultimately, my answer would be, my cash is petty cash fund plus undeposited receipts minus post-dated check and a cash in bank for 2.3. Are there any questions for cash and cash equivalents? So, gets ba how you efficiently study for it? Basically, anticipating the quiz or the exam, ang papatay lang naman sa inyo sa classification is you encounter a new term that you're not familiar with. So, the efficient way to study is get Valix, get Wagon, look for cash and cash equivalent classifications, highlight the ones na you think you'll make a mistake if you see this in the exam, and then have a master key on how to treat it. So, anytime I see a payroll account, that's probably current purpose. Ganun. I see someone raising their hand. Sorry. Napindot lang. Okay, no worries. Yeah. Are there any questions for cash and cash equivalent before I proceed to PCF or bank recon? If not, kindly thumbs up if everything is okay. Okay. Sa PCF naman, honestly, for me, ang pinakamaganda yung resource was the 2 discussions that we had in class. That's also the reason why I wanted to share how I solve it. Kasi it becomes a bit more procedural na, right? But I wanted to share with you these 2 examples so that you'll also see parang other questions that are typically asked for PCF that can also be found in Valix, right? Kindly give me a moment. I'll turn on the lights. Medyo makulimlim. Okay, same. So, we're done with cash and cash equivalent. let's go to PCF. Right? So sa PCF, basically binigyan kayo ng ganito. Coins and currencies, and then yung mga paid vouchers, basically what was found in your lockbox. A manager's check returned by the bank marked NSF. And then a check drawn by entity to the order of the petty cash. So every time you see a check drawn by the entity to the custodian, treat it as a replenishment check. Now, what is the correct amount of petty cash fund for statement presentation purposes? Your gut feel is your gut feel here is that ano ba yung petty cash fund na magkano ba in-establish yung petty cash fund? So, yun yung probably yung unang gut feel nyo na sagot. But the reason why I wanted to show this is that in this problem, hindi binigay yung establishment. So now, you have to think, so how do I arrive with how should PCF be recorded? And we go back to our theory. Remember in theory, paano natin sinosolve yung credit cash in PCF? Or how do we solve for the replenishment check? We get the cash on hand, or basically it was fund. What should be the fund? So let's say 100, right? And then we have cash on hand of 2. And then we have a replenishment check. Right? So 100 minus 2. So alam natin na cash on hand plus replenishment check will be equal to what your fund should be established. So for this, since hindi binigay yung fund, then I will just do cash on hand 33. And then this check drawn by entity to the order of the petty cash custodian is a replenishment check of 27. Yun. And therefore, 6,000 pala yung petty cash fund niya. Right? 6,000. 6,000. Now, yun. So now, tatanungin niyo ako, paano yung 3,000 na voucher? Well, ang mangyayari dyan is that you'll have various debits of 3,000. And then, you have your replenishment check of 27. So may difference ka na 300. This would be a cash overage of 300. But in essence, please understand how it was 6,000. Are there any questions for 1310 for this? Nagets naman. Na parang pag hindi sa inyo binigay yung establishment of fund, how you solve for it is, you get what's the cash on hand represented by coins and currencies. And then you look for a replenishment check lang. And then that should be how your PCF should be recorded. Kasi yun yung establishment niya of the fund. Next. Here we have Liwanag Company. And then they have an impressed petty cash fund of 50,000 with the following details. Now, what amount of petty cash fund should be reported in the statement of financial position? Initially, you'd think 50,000 dapat. But then, walang 50,000 here. And then, you realize, walang 50,000 kasi hindi pa siya nag-replenish. Right? Hindi pa siya nag-replenish. So, meaning, we just analyze all of these and then we have to understand which among of these should be cash or not cash. So, ano yung cash or not cash here? Currencies, cash, 20,000. Coins, 2,000. Okay. Etong petty cash vouchers, all of these are expenses. Pero, useless yan if wala pa tayong replenishment check, right? A check drawn by the entity payable to the order of Grace de la Cruz, petty cash custodian representing her salary. This is the first time I've ever encountered this. So rather than rack my brains, I'll look to the answer key already. An employee's check returned by the bank for insufficiency of funds, so NSF check to. And then a sheet of paper with the names of several employees for a birthday gift. Attached of the sheet of paper is a currency of 5,000. So itong tatlo na to, I don't know how to treat it. So I'll go to the answer key. The check drawn to the order of the petty cash custodian is what we call an accommodating check. And that accommodation check should be part of cash. So okay, edi I'll just take note na every time nag-write ka raw ng check to the custodian, that would be considered as cash. So now, my PCF is 37,000. That's the correct answer. And then, NSF check is not cash. And then, ito, every time you see like, meron raw money, pero it's a contribution of some sorts na pinirmahan ng employee, whatnot. Hindi rin raw yan according to the problem, a cash. So now, every time I see these new statements in the exam or in the quiz, I'll be able to treat them. Yun. Are there any questions for petty cash fund? Kindly thumbs up or thumbs down? Ay, thumbs up. Kindly thumbs up if everything is okay. Okay. And then the last is just bank recon items. So for bank recon, like what I told you, bank recon talaga is just mastering this format wherein I will, okay, do it line item, line by line item. Balance per bank statement, so I'll put it here, balance per bank. Deposit in transit, 195. Checkbook printing charge. It's a printing charge. Sounds like a bank service charge. A bank service charge is a debit memo. So 5,000. Error made by Divine. Sino si Divine? Yung company. Since the error was made by the company, it's a book error in recording check issued in December. So ito, hindi ko alam how to treat the 35,000. So I know that it's 35,000. But since it's in the same check issued, error made in recording check issued, meaning it's probably a payment na hindi ko na-record. So that would be minus 35. Another thing is that it was lumped with checkbook printing charge, which is negative, and an NSF check, which is negative. Kaya yung 35, in terms of classifying it, most likely, I'll treat it as a book error of minus 35, right? And then, the last would be note collection of 215,000, including 15,000 interest. So be careful. Pag sinabing note collected by bank excluding 15,000 interest, rather than 215, that should be 230. So ganun yung mga reading comprehension na ano. Pero 215 is a credit memo. And then outstanding check na lang yung huli, which is 100. So, by adding all of these, I'll get with 2895 and 2895. Now, let's say, hindi ko talaga alam paano i-treat tong error na to. But I know it's a book error. Dito papasok yung diskarte. Na again, ang mas madali i-solve na tama is si bank. Ang kailangan ko lang is DIT. Ang kailangan ko lang is the DIT, the OC, and then 28 plus 195 minus 100 is 2895. I know that this should be 2895. Now, if the book error was plus 35,000, it won't balance. But if it was subtraction, it will balance. So now I'll be more confident. Sure na ako na the book error is minus 35,000. So be crafty. Use whatever you're more comfortable with to double check any things na hindi kayo sure. And then, meron pa dito, what should be the cash reported at year-end? This is a reminder that Bank Recon only talks about cash in bank. So itong 2895 is just one component of what is your cash and cash equivalents. Since I have a cash on hand of 500,000, so 500,000, and a petty cash on of 50, I just add 500 plus 2895 plus 50. 3445. That is the correct answer. And then you double check lang here. Right? Yun. So same lang as you can see, same lang yung format. Anong pinakamahirap sa Bank Recon? Pinakamahirap sa Bank Recon is bank errors and book errors. So an example of this is this one, right? So pag book error, so pag error, first question nyo, sino nagkamali? Si bank or si book? So ito, ang puro nagkamali, si book. So may tatlong mistakes. So the rest, parang ipa-plug in ko lang, right? So balance per bank, ganung same exercise I did with But now I want to focus on book errors. What are examples of book errors? A creditor check of 30,000 was incorrectly recorded in the depositor's book as 300,000. So pag book error or bank error, I want you to first understand the nature. Is it a cash receipt or is it a check disbursement? If it's a check disbursement, you're talking about negatives in your account. What do I mean by this? A creditor check of 300 is a disbursement. So itong 300,000, you initially recorded as negative 300,000. Incorrect yan. What it should be was minus 30,000 lang. Therefore, my book adjustment should be plus 270,000. Kasi dapat ang disbursement ko lang is worth 30,000 na subtraction, pero yung subtraction na ginawa ko was 300,000. So I have to add back 270,000 in order to correct the book. So that's book error number 1. Book error number 2. A customer check for 200 was recorded by the depositor as 20,000. So ito, it's a customer check. So customer check, binayaran ka ng customer. So what is that you recorded it as 20,000 in revenue when in fact it should have been 200,000 in revenue. So how do you increase 20,000 to 200,000? It's just a 180,000 book adjustment. So book error 2 plus 180,000. Last book error. The depositor neglected to make an entry for a check drawn in the payment of an account payable. So currently, wala ka raw journal entry. But what should be was that dapat na subtractan ka ng minus 125 because that is your check disbursement. So that should be your record down. Minus 125. So you have a book error of 125. And then the rest is just solutions, right? So basically, alamin mo lang yung DIT, yung OC, and then bounce checks or debit memos. Yung 5,000 is a bank debit memo for a safety rental pero debit memo, so minus 5,000. Yun lang. Then same lang with the bank. So this would be my last So ito naman mga bank errors. So deposit of 100,000 incorrectly recorded by bank as 10,000. So what is ni-record mo ng 10,000 but it should have been 100,000. So the bank adjustment needs to be plus 90,000. Kaya 90,000. Right? And then ito, check of same company charged by bank against SAM account. We're currently SAM. So tinanggalan raw tayo ng 150. Pero yung si same company naman dapat yung bawasan. So what should be is that hindi tayo dapat binawasan. So you add back 150. So that's bank error number 2. Erroneous debit memo of December 21 to charge SAM account with a settlement of bank loan. So debit memo, binawasan na naman tayo for a SAM erroneously. So again, plus 200,000 is the bank adjustment. And then nag-deposit of SIM company. So may deposit raw to SIM company. We're the SAM company. So dinagdagan nila tayo ng 300,000 when in fact it should be SIM company, not us. So bank adjustment is minus 300,000. So I'll be uploading this, but ganun yung mga nuances. But again, at the end of the day, it's really just the format. And then kindly take note at 1614 kasi it's a very interesting problem also. So actually that ends our cash review. So are there any questions before we end? My only request is for the people that want study tips for or parang pag-usapan natin ano yung mga topics na hindi nyo alam for the special option quiz. And then for those who are taking the makeup exam, kindly stay lang a while so that I can also ask you how you're doing on the review, and how I can help you further for this. Yeah. But aside from this, thank you so much everyone. I'll officially end the recording now. Yeah. Are there any other questions before I end? If none, kindly thumbs up and then we can end the recording. Okay. Lance has a question. Hi, Lance.
Sir, regarding po dun sa exercise, maki-carry over po ba yung bonus points from parang exercise 4 po? Yung may bonus po kasi, di ba? Yung exercise.
Which one?
Yung parang 40 points po ng bonus. Maki-carry over po yun sa mga following exercise.
The 40 points. Yeah. It will.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you po.
Kung may bank kayo, then that will apply pa rin in terms of the exercise. So, my only parang reminder for everyone is that the only thing that will parang not give you your 5% is that if you don't submit a homework in the second part, yun. As in yun, medyo hindi yun pwede bawian. Pero the rest, kung parang mga -2, -3 lang kayo for the exercises, that's quickly, madaling bawian lang yun with a class reset or with the extra bonus points that we've had in the previous. So, the only thing that I'll be strict about is non-submissions. So, as long as you submit on time and then it looks like you put in the effort, then the participation grade, you don't have to worry about that. Yeah. Thanks for that, Lance. Yun. If there are none, I'll officially end the recording.